The stars looked different through the viewport of the New Horizon. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center, watching the strange purple sun that lit up this part of space. His ship had been traveling for 3 months since leaving Earth's solar system. Today everything would change. "Captain, we're getting signals," said Communications Officer Steve Chen. He turned from his control panel with wide eyes. "It's not random noise. These are real messages from someone out there." Jake walked over to Steve's station. The sounds coming through the speakers were unlike anything humans had ever heard. They were musical but also mechanical, like singing robots. "Can you understand any of it?" "Not yet, but the computer is working on it," Steve replied. "Wait, I think they're trying to talk to us now. The signals are getting stronger." The main screen flickered and then showed an image that made everyone in the command center stop talking. An alien face looked back at them. It had blue skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. When it spoke, the computer translated its words into English. "Unknown vessel, you have entered the territory of the Xanthari Empire. State your purpose or prepare to be destroyed." Jake stepped forward. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship New Horizon. We come in peace. This is our first time meeting other intelligent life." The alien's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Earth, we have no record of this world. You will follow our ships to Pristina Prime for evaluation. Do not resist or you will be terminated." 3 massive ships appeared around the New Horizon. They were 10 times larger and covered in weapons. Jake knew his ship could not fight them. "We agree to come with you," he said. Ambassador Lyra Voss joined Jake on the bridge. She had been chosen for this mission because she was good at talking to difficult people. "What do we know about them?" she asked. "Not much," said Dr. Lisa Grant, the ship's scientist. "Their technology is clearly more advanced than ours, but they seem very formal, very organized. Look at their ships. Everything is perfectly symmetrical." The journey to Pristina Prime took 2 days. During this time, the humans studied everything they could about their captors. The Xanthari sent over basic information about their empire. They controlled 7 different alien species across hundreds of worlds. They had rules for everything, and believed they were the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. When they arrived at Pristina Prime, the humans were amazed. The entire planet was one giant city. Tall silver towers reached into the clouds connected by bridges and tubes. Everything was clean and shiny. There were no signs of nature anywhere. "It's like they built over their entire world," whispered tech specialist Ben Carter as they landed. The humans were escorted to a large building in the center of the city. High Chancellor Kelthvar met them in a room with walls made of some kind of crystal. He was taller than the first alien they had seen, with golden skin and 6 arms instead of 4 eyes. "Welcome to Pristina Prime," Kelthvar said through the translator. "I am High Chancellor of the Xanthari Empire. You are here to be evaluated for integration into our society." "Integration?" asked Ambassador Voss. "What does that mean exactly?" "All species that enter our territory become part of our empire," Kelthvar explained. "We will test your abilities and assign you appropriate roles. Most new species become workers or servants. A few show promise for technical positions." Jake and Lyra exchanged glances. This was not the friendly first contact they had hoped for. But they had to be careful. These aliens had the power to destroy Earth if they wanted to. "We would be honored to learn about your great empire," Lyra said diplomatically. "Perhaps we could have some time to prepare for these tests." Kelthvar seemed pleased by her respectful tone. "Very well. You will be given quarters in our guest facility. You have 3 days to rest and prepare. Then testing begins." The Xanthari escorts led them through corridors filled with other aliens. Jake noticed that they all walked in straight lines and spoke in whispers. Everything was incredibly organized and quiet. Signs on the walls gave directions in multiple languages, but they were all very simple commands like, "Walk here and do not touch." Their quarters were luxurious but strange. The rooms had no corners. Everything was curved. The furniture was built into the walls and could not be moved. There were no windows, but screens showed views of the perfect city outside. "This place gives me the creeps," said Commander Ryan Burke once they were alone. He was the ship's security chief and naturally suspicious. "Look at this room. It's designed so we can't rearrange anything or hide anywhere." Dr. Grant was already examining the walls with a small device. "The air is perfectly filtered," she said. "No bacteria, no dust, no pollution. It's like they've sterilized their entire world." Ben Carter found the computer controls. "These systems are incredibly advanced, but they're also incredibly rigid. Everything has to be done exactly one way. There's no room for creativity or changes. Ambassador Voss gathered everyone together. We need to be very careful here, she said quietly. These Xanthari think they're superior to everyone else. They expect us to be grateful for the chance to serve them. So what's our plan? Asked Jake. Lyra smiled slightly. We give them exactly what they expect to see. We act like we're impressed by their perfect society. We ask lots of questions like curious children. We let them think we're simple and harmless. And while we're doing that, asked Ryan, we learn everything we can about them. Their technology, their society, their weaknesses. They're going to test us, but we're going to test them too. Dr. Grant nodded. I've already started collecting data. Did you notice how all the Xanthari we've seen so far follow exact patterns? They don't seem to improvise or adapt. That could be useful, said Steve. If they're too rigid, they might not expect us to be flexible. Over the next 3 days, the humans explored their situation carefully. They attended formal meals where Xanthari officials explained their empire's history. They toured facilities where other alien species worked in perfect harmony. They observed and learned and smiled politely, but they also began to plant seeds. Ben started casual conversations with Xanthari technicians about human engineering. Lisa shared stories about Earth's diverse environments. Steve taught some young Xanthari workers simple human games. The Xanthari watched everything, but they saw only what they expected. A primitive species trying to understand superior civilization. They had no idea that the humans were conducting their own evaluation, measuring Xanthari strengths and weaknesses with every interaction. On the third night, as they prepared for the formal testing to begin, Ambassador Voss looked at her team. Remember, they think they know what humans are capable of. Let's show them how wrong they are. The testing began at dawn. High Chancellor Kelthvar led the humans to a massive complex filled with laboratories and examination rooms. Hundreds of Xanthari scientists waited to study these new specimens from an unknown world. We will evaluate your physical capabilities, mental capacity, and social adaptability, Kelthvar announced. Based on these results, we will determine your proper place in our empire. Ambassador Lyra Voss nodded respectfully. We are eager to learn from your advanced civilization. The humans were separated for individual testing. This was exactly what they wanted. Together, they were just a small group of aliens. Spread out, they could interact with many different Xanthari and begin their real work. Dr. Lisa Grant found herself in a biological research facility. The Xanthari scientists were fascinated by human physiology. They scanned her body and asked endless questions about Earth's environment. Your planet must be very harsh, said Dr. Vecnal, the lead researcher. Your immune system is incredibly complex. You have defenses against thousands of different diseases and toxins. Lisa acted surprised. Is that unusual? On Earth, we just call it staying healthy. Most species we encounter have simple immune systems, Vecnal explained. They evolve on stable worlds with few threats. Your biology suggests constant warfare against hostile environments. Lisa began sharing stories about Earth that sounded innocent, but were actually quite frightening. She talked about hurricanes like they were minor weather events. She described winter as a normal season, even though temperatures that would kill most aliens were involved. She mentioned that humans regularly ate plants and animals that would poison other species. You consume ethanol for pleasure? Vecnal asked, horrified. That is a deadly toxin. Oh, alcohol? Yes, we drink it at parties, Lisa said cheerfully. Some humans can drink quite a lot without problems. Meanwhile, tech specialist Ben Carter was in the engineering section. The Xanthari engineers were proud of their technology and eager to show off their achievements. Ben played the role of an impressed primitive, asking lots of questions and praising their advanced systems. This power core is amazing, Ben said, examining their energy systems. On Earth, we're still using much simpler technology. Of course, said Engineer Polthar with obvious pride. This reactor has operated perfectly for over 200 years without any maintenance. Ben looked impressed, but he was actually concerned. Human engineers changed and improved their systems constantly. A reactor that never needed updates suggested technology that could not adapt or evolve. What happens if something unexpected occurs? Ben asked innocently. Unexpected? Nothing unexpected happens, Polthar replied. Our systems are perfect. They handle all possible situations. Ben filed this information away. Perfect systems were actually fragile systems. They worked well under normal conditions but failed catastrophically when faced with new problems. Commander Ryan Burke was with the military division. The Xanthari officers wanted to understand human combat capabilities. They put him through physical tests and tactical simulations. "Your species has interesting reflexes," noted General Kethvor. "You seem adapted for irregular warfare rather than organized battles." Ryan pretended to be embarrassed. "We're not very good at following complex plans. Humans tend to improvise when things go wrong." "Improvisation is inefficient," the general stated. "Proper military operations follow established protocols. Deviation leads to chaos." Ryan agreed humbly while mentally noting that Xanthari military doctrine was completely predictable. They had detailed plans for every situation but no ability to adapt when those plans failed. During combat simulations, Ryan deliberately lost most of the formal battles, but won every survival scenario. He wanted them to see humans as tough but undisciplined, dangerous in desperate situations but easily controlled under normal circumstances. Ambassador Voss spent her time with Xanthari political leaders. They explained their governmental system with obvious pride. Every citizen had a designated role and followed specific rules. Crime was almost unknown because everyone knew their place in society. "It sounds very peaceful," Voss said admiringly. "On Earth, our governments are much more chaotic." "Chaos is the enemy of progress," declared Minister Helkant. "Your species will benefit greatly from our structured approach to civilization." Voss asked careful questions about how the Xanthari handled dissent and change. The answers revealed a society that was stable but brittle. They maintained order by preventing all deviation from established norms. "What happens when citizens disagree with government decisions?" Voss asked. "Citizens do not disagree," Minister Helkant replied simply. "Our system is designed to prevent such problems." Communications Officer Steve Chen was assigned to cultural evaluation. The Xanthari wanted to understand human social patterns and entertainment. Steve had brought several movies and games from Earth as examples of human culture. The young Xanthari researchers were fascinated by human stories. They had never seen anything like human movies, which were full of conflict, romance, and individual heroes making independent decisions. "This character defies the authority of his superiors," observed cultural analyst Melvar while watching an action movie. "Yet the story presents this as positive behavior." "Well, sometimes authorities make mistakes," Steve explained. "In human stories, individuals often have to think for themselves." The Xanthari researchers found this concept disturbing but intriguing. Their own entertainment consisted of educational programs and formal ceremonies. The idea of stories that questioned authority was completely foreign to them. Steve also taught them simple human games like chess and poker. The Xanthari quickly mastered the rules but struggled with the psychological aspects. They could not understand bluffing or why anyone would make a move that seemed disadvantageous. "These games involve deception," Melvar noted with concern. "Players deliberately provide false information to gain advantage." "It's just for fun," Steve said innocently. "Humans enjoy trying to outsmart each other." By the end of the first week, the humans had made contact with hundreds of Xanthari across different departments. They had shared stories, taught games, and answered thousands of questions about human culture and biology. The Xanthari scientists were beginning to realize that humans were more complex than they had initially assumed. Their biology suggested a species adapted for extreme survival. Their technology was primitive but showed unusual creativity. Their social patterns were chaotic, but somehow functional. More concerning were the small changes appearing among the Xanthari themselves. Young researchers had started asking unusual questions about their own society. Engineers were proposing modifications to systems that had worked unchanged for centuries. Military officers were discussing new tactical approaches that deviated from standard doctrine. High Chancellor Kelthvar reviewed the reports with growing unease. The humans appeared harmless and eager to please, but their very presence was causing unexpected disruptions in Xanthari society. "The contamination appears to be spreading," he told his advisors. "These humans carry ideas that are affecting our people's thinking patterns. Should we isolate them?" asked Minister Helkant. Kelthvar considered this. "Not yet. We need to understand what we are dealing with. But increase monitoring on all Xanthari who have had contact with the humans, and accelerate the testing process." The humans continued their careful work, unaware that they had already begun to achieve their true objective. They were not trying to impress the Xanthari with their abilities. They were introducing concepts that would slowly but inevitably change how the Xanthari thought about their perfect empire. The seeds of change were planted. Now they just needed time to grow. 2 weeks into the testing period, the changes were becoming impossible to ignore. High Chancellor Kelthvar received reports from across the facility that made him increasingly nervous. Young Xanthari researchers were asking questions that had never been asked before. Workers were suggesting improvements to systems that had operated unchanged for generations. The most disturbing report came from the military division. General Kelthvar requested an emergency meeting to discuss irregular, behavioral patterns among his officers. They are questioning established tactics, the general explained during the private conference. Yesterday, 3 junior officers submitted alternative strategies for defending our outer colonies. When I reminded them that our current methods have proven successful for centuries, they asked why success should prevent improvement. Kelthvar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep concern. What prompted these questions? The human called Ryan Burke, Kelthvar admitted. He has been discussing theoretical combat scenarios with my staff. He appears to be genuinely interested in learning our methods, but his questions reveal thinking patterns that are infectious. Similar reports came from every department. The human called Ben Carter had engineers reconsidering fundamental assumptions about system design. The female called Lisa Grant had biologists questioning why they had never attempted to study hostile environments. The one called Steve Chen had cultural researchers asking why Xanthari entertainment was so limited in scope. Most concerning was Ambassador Lyra Voss. Her diplomatic discussions had political officials thinking about concepts they had never considered before. She asked innocent questions about citizen satisfaction and individual freedom that revealed gaps in Xanthari social theory. We need to understand what is happening, Kelthvar decided. Increase surveillance on all human activities. I want detailed analysis of every conversation, every interaction, every moment of their presence here. The enhanced monitoring revealed the true scope of the problem. The humans were not actively trying to subvert Xanthari society. They were simply being themselves, sharing their perspectives and responding to questions. But their very existence challenged every assumption the Xanthari had about civilization and social order. Dr. Lisa Grant continued her biological research sessions, cheerfully describing Earth's environment in ways that horrified Xanthari scientists. She talked about cosmic radiation, extreme weather, and evolutionary pressures that sounded like descriptions of a hell world. Your species evolved during an ice age? Dr. Vecnal asked with amazement. How did you survive? We adapted, Lisa replied simply. Humans are good at adapting. When the climate changed, we learned to make better tools and work together more effectively. But the psychological stress of such constant threat, Vecnal began. What psychological stress? Lisa asked, genuinely confused. Challenge makes life interesting. Humans get bored when things are too easy. This concept was completely alien to Xanthari thinking. They had spent millennia creating perfect, stable conditions for their citizens. The idea that individuals might actually prefer challenge and uncertainty was deeply disturbing. Ben Carter was having similar effects in the engineering sections. He praised Xanthari technology enthusiastically, while casually mentioning human innovations that seemed impossible by Xanthari standards. You built this entire reactor without any redundant systems? Ben asked admiringly. That shows incredible confidence in your design. Engineer Polthar beamed with pride. Redundancy is inefficient. Our calculations ensure perfect operation. On Earth, we usually build backup systems for our backup systems, Ben said conversationally. Human engineers assume everything will eventually break down, so we plan for multiple failure modes. But if your calculations are correct, failure should be impossible, Polthar protested. Ben smiled. Humans learned a long time ago that the universe doesn't care about our calculations. Sometimes the impossible happens anyway. This casual comment kept Polthar awake for 3 nights. The possibility that perfect systems might still fail was a concept that challenged his entire worldview. Commander, Ryan Burke was conducting his own form of psychological warfare in the military training areas. He participated in combat simulations with enthusiasm, but also shared stories about human military history that revealed disturbing truths about human nature. The largest war in our history involved over 60 nations. Ryan mentioned during a tactical discussion. It lasted 6 years and completely changed our world. General Kethfor was appalled. 60 nations fighting simultaneously? How did your species survive such chaos? We learned from it, Ryan replied. Humans use conflict to develop new technologies and social systems. War is terrible, but it also drives innovation and cooperation. Cooperation through conflict? The general asked, confused by the contradiction. Nothing brings humans together like a common enemy, Ryan explained. We fight each other constantly, but when faced with external threats, we unite incredibly quickly. This revelation that humans could be both chaotic and unified, destructive and creative, challenged every model the Xanthari had for understanding species development. Ambassador Voss was conducting the most sophisticated operation of all. Her diplomatic meetings had evolved into philosophical discussions that gradually introduced concepts of individual rights and democratic government. On Earth, our leaders are chosen by popular vote, she mentioned during a discussion about governmental efficiency. Minister Helkant was shocked. Citizens choose their own leaders? But how do you ensure proper qualifications? We don't always, Voss admitted. Sometimes we choose poorly. But the ability to remove bad leaders and try again is more important than guaranteeing perfect choices. But the inefficiency, the potential for chaos. Helkant protested. Chaos can be productive, Voss replied gently. Human progress comes from people disagreeing with each other and trying new approaches. Our greatest achievements often come from individuals who refuse to accept that something was impossible. These conversations were being recorded and analyzed by teams of Xanthari social scientists. Their reports grew increasingly alarmed as they realized the implications of human political philosophy. The humans operate under a system of organized chaos, reported Chief Analyst Kelthar. They accept uncertainty and conflict as natural parts of social development. They appear to believe that stability without growth is actually a form of decay. Meanwhile, Steve Chen was introducing young Xanthari to human entertainment that revealed even more disturbing aspects of human psychology. Movies and games that portrayed individuals challenging authority, taking personal risks for moral principles, and achieving victory through creativity rather than following established rules. This character chooses to sacrifice himself to save others, observed cultural analyst Melvar while watching a human movie. He receives no personal benefit from this action. Humans do that sometimes, Steve said casually. We call it heroism. Sometimes individuals decide that some things are more important than their own survival. But self-preservation is the primary drive of all intelligent life. Melvar protested. Not always, Steve replied. Humans have lots of drives that sometimes conflict with survival. We value honor, justice, love, freedom. Sometimes we choose those things even when they're dangerous. The concept that an intelligent species might voluntarily choose dangerous actions for abstract principles was perhaps the most frightening revelation of all. It suggested that humans could not be controlled through normal methods of threat and reward. High Chancellor Kelthvar called an emergency session of the ruling council. The reports from all departments painted a consistent picture. The humans were fundamentally different from any species the Xanthari had ever encountered. They are not trying to subvert our society, he told the assembled leaders. They are simply existing in ways that make our citizens question everything we have built. Their very presence is a form of contamination that spreads through social contact. What do you recommend? Asked Minister Helkant. Kelthvar considered the options carefully. We cannot integrate them into our society as we planned. They are too dangerous for that. But we also cannot simply eliminate them. That would make them martyrs and potentially make the contamination worse. Then what do we do with them? We accelerate the evaluation process and try to understand exactly what kind of threat they represent. Then we decide whether to exile them or find some other solution. But Kelthvar privately suspected it might already be too late. The ideas the humans had introduced were spreading through Xanthari society like a virus. Young Xanthari were beginning to ask questions that had no acceptable answers within their perfect system. The humans had been on Pristina Prime for only 2 weeks, but they had already begun to accomplish something no military force had ever achieved. They were making the Xanthari question whether their empire was actually as perfect as they believed. The crisis reached a breaking point 3 weeks after the humans arrived. High Chancellor Kelthvar received emergency reports from 12 different worlds across the Zenthari Empire. The contamination had spread far beyond Pristina Prime, through normal communication channels and routine personnel transfers. On the industrial world of Mechanica 7, workers had started forming informal groups to discuss workplace improvements. This had never happened before in 3 centuries of operation. On the research station at Nebula Point, scientists were proposing experimental projects that deviated from approved research protocols. Most alarming of all, on the military outpost at Border Station 5, junior officers were requesting permission to develop new defensive strategies. The infection has gone viral, reported Intelligence Director Malketh during an emergency session. Every facility that has received personnel who had contact with the humans is showing similar symptoms. What exactly are these symptoms? Demanded Council Member Veltar. Independent thinking, Malketh replied grimly. Citizens are beginning to question whether current methods are the only possible approaches to their assigned tasks. They are expressing dissatisfaction with limitations they previously accepted without complaint. High Chancellor Kelthvar studied the data streaming across his personal display. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Human ideas were spreading through Zenthari society exactly like a biological plague, jumping from mind to mind through normal social contact. What is the current status of the humans themselves? He asked. They appear unaware of the effects they are causing, Malketh admitted. Our surveillance indicates they believe they are simply participating in standard cultural exchange protocols. They show no signs of deliberate subversion. This made the situation even more disturbing. If the humans were causing this disruption accidentally, it meant they were even more dangerous than initially suspected. Their mere existence was incompatible with Zenthari civilization. Dr. Lisa Grant continued her research sessions, completely unaware that her casual comments about human biology were causing existential crises among Zenthari scientists. She had recently described human exercise routines as fun activities that make us stronger. You deliberately expose yourselves to physical stress for pleasure? Dr. Vecnal asked in amazement. Exercise feels good, Lisa explained. Humans enjoy pushing our bodies to their limits. It's satisfying to overcome physical challenges. But why would you seek out difficulty when comfortable alternatives exist? Lisa thought about this question seriously. Because easy things don't help us grow. Humans believe that struggle makes us better people. We get stronger by facing problems, not by avoiding them. This philosophy was so alien to Zenthari, thinking that Dr. Vecnal requested emergency counseling sessions with the facility's psychological staff. The idea that beings would voluntarily choose difficulty over comfort challenged everything he understood about intelligent behavior. Ben Carter was having similar effects in the engineering department. His discussions about human technology had evolved into conversations about innovation philosophy that kept Zenthari engineers awake at night. Humans assume that every system can be improved, Ben explained to a group of fascinated technicians. We never consider any design to be truly finished. There's always a better way to do something. Engineer Polthar raised a concerned objection. But continuous change creates instability. How do you maintain reliable operations? We build flexibility into our systems, Ben replied. Human technology is designed to be modified and upgraded. We expect things to change, so we plan for it. But what if changes make things worse instead of better? Ben smiled. Then we change them again. Humans learn from failure just as much as from success. Sometimes you have to try 10 bad ideas to find one good one. The concept that failure could be a valuable learning tool, rather than something to be avoided at all costs, was revolutionary to Zenthari engineers. Several of them submitted requests to experiment with non-optimal designs just to see what would happen. Commander Ryan Burke was conducting psychological warfare so subtle that even he wasn't fully aware of its effects. His discussions about human military history had evolved into philosophical conversations about the nature of conflict and cooperation. The most successful human military campaigns involve multiple independent units working toward a common goal, Ryan explained to a group of Zenthari officers. Each unit adapts to local conditions while maintaining overall coordination. General Kethfor struggled to understand this concept. But without central control, how do you prevent chaos and confusion? We train our people to understand the mission, not just follow orders, Ryan replied. When situations change unexpectedly, local commanders make decisions based on the overall objective, rather than waiting for new instructions. You allow subordinates to modify operational plans? We expect them to, Ryan said simply. Human military doctrine assumes that no plan survives contact with the enemy. Flexibility is more important than adherence to predetermined strategies. This revelation that human military success was based on controlled chaos rather than rigid discipline forced Xanthari, military theorists, to reconsider fundamental assumptions about command and control. Ambassador Voss was conducting the most sophisticated operation of all. Her diplomatic meetings had become graduate-level courses in alternative political philosophy, delivered so gently that the Xanthari participants didn't realize they were being educated. Human governments derive their authority from the consent of the governed, she explained during a discussion about political legitimacy. Minister Helkant found this concept deeply troubling. But if citizens can withdraw their consent, how do you maintain social stability? We don't maintain it, Voss replied calmly. We earn it continuously. Human leaders know that their authority depends on satisfying the people they serve. When they fail to do so, they are replaced. Replaced how? Through elections, protests, revolutions, or simply loss of public support, Voss explained. Humans have many ways to change leadership when it becomes necessary. The idea that political authority was temporary and conditional, rather than permanent and absolute, was perhaps the most dangerous concept the humans had introduced. It suggested that the entire Xanthari system of government might be illegitimate. Steve Chen was completing the psychological assault through cultural contamination. His movie nights had become popular events among young Xanthari, who were experiencing emotions and ideas they had never encountered before. This story shows humans choosing love over duty, observed cultural analyst Melvar after watching a romantic drama. The characters defy social expectations to pursue personal happiness. Humans believe that individual fulfillment is important, Steve explained. We think people should have the right to make their own choices about their lives, even when those choices conflict with social conventions. But social conventions exist to maintain order, Melvar protested. Sometimes order isn't the most important thing, Steve replied gently. Humans value freedom, creativity, and personal growth more than stability. This conversation was recorded and analyzed by teams of Xanthari social scientists who concluded that human cultural values were completely incompatible with civilized society. The final crisis began when reports arrived from the outer colonies. Workers on mining stations had started forming what they called improvement committees to discuss better ways to organize their operations. Agricultural settlements were experimenting with new farming techniques that deviated from established protocols. Even isolated research outposts were requesting permission to investigate unauthorized areas of study. The contamination has reached the furthest edges of our empire, reported Intelligence Director Mal Keth. Citizens who have never seen a human are being affected by ideas transmitted through routine communications. High Chancellor Kelthvar realized that they were facing an unprecedented crisis. The humans had not conquered the Xanthari Empire through military force or political manipulation. They were destroying it simply by existing and sharing their perspective on life. We have underestimated the nature of the threat, he announced to the Emergency Council. These humans are not trying to subvert our society. They are simply incompatible with it. Their very presence creates changes that spread through our population like a contagious disease. What do you propose we do? Asked Minister Helkant. Kelthvar considered the options carefully. Military action against the humans would only make them martyrs and potentially accelerate the contamination. Isolation was no longer possible because the ideas had already spread too far. Integration was impossible because human concepts of individual freedom were fundamentally destructive to Xanthari social order. We need to understand exactly what we are dealing with, he decided. Bring the humans to the main council chamber. It is time for direct confrontation. But privately, Kelthvar suspected that this confrontation would not go as the Xanthari expected. The humans had already demonstrated their ability to win conflicts without fighting. They were about to discover whether human diplomatic skills were as dangerous as their cultural influence. The Grand Council chamber of Pristina Prime had never hosted a meeting like this one. High Chancellor Kelthvar sat at the center of a massive circular table, surrounded by the most powerful leaders in the Zenthari Empire. Across from them, 5 humans sat calmly, apparently unaware that they were about to face accusations that could result in their execution. Ambassador Voss, Kelthvar began formally, you and your people are here to answer for crimes against the stability of our empire. Lyra Voss looked genuinely surprised. Crimes? High Chancellor, we have done nothing but participate in the cultural exchange and evaluation process you requested. That is precisely the problem, Kelthvar replied grimly. Your participation has caused unprecedented disruption across our civilization. Citizens who have never questioned authority are now demanding explanations for policies that have maintained order for millennia. Captain Jake Morrison leaned forward. With respect, High Chancellor, we have simply answered questions and shared information about our own culture. If that has caused problems, perhaps the questions themselves were important ones. The simple suggestion that questioning authority might be valuable rather than dangerous sent murmurs of alarm through the assembled Zenthari leaders. Even now, even facing accusations of subversion, the humans continued to introduce concepts that challenged fundamental assumptions. You do not understand what you have done, declared Minister Helkant. Our empire has achieved perfect stability through careful control of information and social development. Your casual sharing of human perspectives has undone centuries of careful progress. Dr. Lisa Grant spoke up quietly. What kind of progress requires preventing people from asking questions? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Every Zenthari leader understood the implication. A system that could not tolerate inquiry might not be as perfect as they believed. Intelligence Director Malketh activated a holographic display showing data from across the empire. In 3 weeks, you have caused more social disruption than we have experienced in the previous 3 centuries. Workers are forming unauthorized committees. Scientists are proposing experimental research. Military officers are questioning established tactics. And this is bad because, asked Ben Carter innocently. The question was so fundamentally challenging to Zenthari worldview that several council members required medical attention. The possibility that social change might be beneficial rather than threatening was literally incomprehensible to them. High Chancellor Kelthvar struggled to maintain composure. Order is the foundation of civilization. Without stability, society collapses into chaos and violence. Has there been any violence? Ambassador Voss asked calmly. Malketh checked his reports. No actual violence has occurred. Have productivity levels decreased? Actually, productivity has increased on most worlds, Malketh admitted reluctantly. Have citizens expressed dissatisfaction with improvements to their working conditions? Citizens appear to be happier, Malketh said with obvious confusion. Ambassador Voss nodded thoughtfully. So people are more productive, happier, and still peaceful. But this is considered a crisis because they are asking questions? The logical trap was so elegant that several Zenthari leaders recognized it immediately. Their empire was rejecting positive changes simply because those changes had not been officially approved. Commander Ryan Burke decided to escalate the conversation. High Chancellor, may I ask you a question about Zenthari military doctrine? Kelthvar nodded cautiously. Your empire has existed for over 2,000 years and controls hundreds of worlds. Ryan continued. In all that time, have you ever encountered a military threat that your standard tactics could not handle? Our military has never been defeated, General Kelthvar replied proudly. That's not what I asked, Ryan said gently. Have you ever faced an enemy that forced you to develop new strategies? The general paused, realizing the implication. No. Our established methods have always been sufficient. Then how do you know your military is actually strong? Ryan asked. If you've never been truly tested, how can you be certain your systems work against sophisticated opposition? This question struck at the heart of Zenthari confidence. Their empire had grown through conquest of primitive species and absorption of weaker civilizations. They had never faced an enemy that challenged their fundamental assumptions about warfare. Steve Chen added his own perspective. The most dangerous thing that can happen to any system is for it to work perfectly for too long. Perfect success prevents learning, and systems that cannot learn eventually face problems they cannot solve. What are you suggesting? Demanded Minister Helkant. We're suggesting that your empire might be more fragile than you realize. Ambassador Voss replied calmly. You've created a civilization that cannot adapt, because adaptation requires questioning existing methods. And now you're facing exactly the kind of challenge your system cannot handle. Captain Morrison continued. You have citizens who are thinking independently, asking questions and proposing improvements. Your response is to treat this as a crisis rather than an opportunity. High Chancellor Kelthvar realized that the humans had maneuvered the conversation into extremely dangerous territory. They were not just criticizing Xanthari policies, they were exposing fundamental flaws in the entire imperial system. What do you want from us? He asked directly. Ambassador Voss smiled gently. We want to establish a mutually beneficial relationship between our species. But that requires recognizing that humanity brings something valuable to the galaxy. And what is that? We bring change, Dr. Grant said simply. Humans are natural innovators. We question everything, try new approaches, and adapt to unexpected situations. These abilities make us valuable allies and dangerous enemies. But change threatens stability, protested Minister Helkant. Stability without growth is death, Steve Chen replied. Civilizations that stop evolving eventually face challenges they cannot overcome. Humans can help prevent that. Ben Carter elaborated on this theme. Every human invention, every scientific advance, every social improvement came from someone who refused to accept that the current way was the only way. We're offering to share that perspective with your empire. In exchange for what? Kelthvar asked suspiciously. Freedom to be ourselves, Captain Morrison answered. We don't want to rule your empire or destroy your culture. We want to coexist as equals, sharing ideas and learning from each other. Commander Burke added a more practical consideration. Of course, if you decide that coexistence is impossible, you should know that trying to suppress human ideas by force will only make them spread faster. Humans have a saying, the forbidden fruit is always the sweetest. The threat was delivered so casually that it took several moments for the Xanthari leaders to understand its implications. If they attempted to silence human influence through persecution, they would only make human ideas more attractive to their citizens. You have planned this from the beginning, Kelthvar accused. No, Ambassador Voss replied honestly. We came here hoping for peaceful first contact. What happened afterward was simply the natural result of two very different civilizations meeting each other. You knew your presence would be disruptive. We knew we were different, Voss admitted. But we also knew that differences can be sources of strength rather than weakness. The question is whether your empire is wise enough to recognize that. The chamber fell silent as the Xanthari leaders contemplated their options. They could attempt to destroy the humans, but that might trigger exactly the kind of uprising they feared. They could try to isolate human influence, but the ideas had already spread too far. Or they could attempt to find a way to coexist with a species that challenged everything they believed about civilization. High Chancellor Kelthvar made his decision. We propose a treaty. Humans will be granted autonomous territory within our empire, free to govern themselves according to their own customs. In exchange, you will serve as consultants, helping us adapt to challenges that require unconventional solutions. Ambassador Voss considered this carefully. And are people who are already spreading human ideas throughout your empire? They will be granted amnesty and allowed to continue their work, Kelthvar decided. Perhaps some change is inevitable. The treaty negotiations took 3 days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The humans had won a victory without firing a shot, gaining autonomy and influence through nothing more than being themselves. As the human delegation prepared to return to their ship, Minister Helkant approached Ambassador Voss privately. How did you know this would work? He asked. Voss smiled. We didn't know it would work. We just knew that humans are very good at adapting to new situations, even when those situations involve accidentally conquering an empire through cultural contamination. Is that what you call this? Conquest? We call it making friends, Voss replied. Humans learned long ago that the best way to defeat an enemy is to make them no longer want to be your enemy. As the New Horizon departed Pristina Prime, carrying the first human ambassadors to an alien empire, reports were already coming in from across Xanthari space. Citizens were forming committees, scientists were proposing experiments, and military officers were developing new strategies.